there may be a political agenda to this so-called. The instructions are opaque at first and introduce many concepts you're not familiar with. Fortunately, there are many you soon figure out the basic conceit. Each player represents an administrator for the suzerain of Revachol. Your objective is to increase the suzerain's wealth and renown by accumulating victory points. That's where the suzerain's vassals come in. The game features 4 vassal nations. Each turn, the player collects resources from vassals where they've placed workers. They may then rearrange their workers, fulfill contracts for coin and bonuses, or build structures back. As you leaf through the pages, your eye catches on a sidebar labeled Advice for Beginners. Remember, there are many paths to victory in Suzerainty, but successful players will find one. The actual scoring system appears infinitely complex, with a series of tables and appendices required to. You open up a number of pouches containing wooden tokens. There are also several punch boards with other cardboard components that will need to be punched out. Each cardboard token makes a satisfying as you pop it out. Soon, a neat pile of cardboard coins and counters has accumulated.
What? You're not going to offer to let me punch any of them out?
In addition to the worker and building tokens used by each player, there are also several from the Empire of Safre, orange apricot tokens, from Ilmarat, the ancestral name of Ilmara, grey marble block tokens, from the Semenine Islands, white sacks of sugar tokens, and from Supramuindi and Saro Maritza, magenta tokens for unprocessed cocaine leaves.
Oh, those are nice.
You hold the open game box before you. The lieutenant looks over the rulebook before he sees something.
Holy shit. The average playing time for this game is 1 to 6 hours. I'm not sure we can afford to set aside that kind of time for a game.
The Suzerainty box is heavy and slight. What is detective work if not an elaborate game? You need logical inference, attention to detail, the ability to analyze your opponent's motives.
I do feel like my thinking has become somewhat rigid. Maybe a little diversion to keep the mind limber is just what's in order.
See? He's doing the hard work himself.
All right. You've convinced me. How do we play?
You explain the basic setup procedures to the lieutenant, who seems to be a quick study. In the center is the crown of Revachol. Radiating outward are her colorful vassals, each one supplying some raw material desired by the apricots from Safre. Archaeological treasure. There's also a neat little log to keep track of your progress, in case you need to put the game away and return. The lieutenant goes first. He draws a contract card and moves several of his workers to the Safre territory off the board.
All right, detective.
You have a few options available to you. Will you try to fulfill contracts right away, or rearrange your workers to maximize production on future turns? Remember what the rulebook said. You will want to choose a strategy early on and stay committed to it. You move a few of your workers to the Ilmarat section of the board and several others to Supramawindi and Sarah Maritza. Soon you have several units of archaeological treasure and cocaine.
An aggressive opening, Detective.
In response, the lieutenant spends 2 of his sugar tokens and 1 of his apricot tokens to complete his contract card. He is rewarded with 4 coins and a round wooden token that he places in the center of the board.
That's a market. It's worth 2 victory points. Don't worry, it was mostly just luck. You'll earn some points soon enough. Points are nothing. They don't exist. They're just an arbitrary convention that games use to reward or punish players for certain behaviors. There are some paranoid types who believe the moral intern keeps detailed score sheets for everyone in the Real Belt, but that's obviously nonsense. Otherwise, no. There are no points, just your actions and the consequences of those actions. That's just the way it is. Now, I believe it's your turn.
Glancing over the board, you see several possible strategies. Pressing more workers into service would increase your economic output and help you to survive a possible conflict with the lieutenant. Or you could ignore your labor supply and focus on fulfilling contracts for points and resources. Those aren't your only options. You could also show your workers how much you appreciate them by investing some of that wealth in them. After all, they're the ones producing wealth for the Suzerain. Well, sure, you can do that. It's just not a terribly effective strategy, but then it's up to you. To the lieutenant's puzzlement, you spend several turns building various improvements to your territorial infrastructure. Soon, your workers have access to clean water, paved roads, and basic hobbies. In return, they produce 1 extra resource per turn.
Too bad investing in your workers just isn't worth many points. Take a look at the scoring tables in the back. You see in Table 8C that investing in territorial infrastructure multiplies your final victory point total by 1, which is to say not at all. Whereas erecting monuments in Revachol gives you a multiplier of 5. Yes, precisely.
Nonsense. Remember what the lieutenant said. If points are arbitrary, who cares about winning? You should reject their system and just play how you want. Now it's the lieutenant's turn to respond. He moves aggressively onto the Safre territory. Soon, his workers are producing a steady supply of extremely valuable apricots. For several turns, you struggle to respond to the lieutenant's burgeoning apricot empire. Eventually, you relocate the majority of your workers to Supramawindi and Sarah Maritza, where they begin producing a bumper crop of cocaine tokens. You draw a new contract card. According to the text, there's an aristocrat willing to trade a large supply of cocaine for a number of coins and access to a rare bonus. Amplified music worth 7 victory points. You know, this isn't unlike the situation the historical Revacholian Suzerainty faced in Safre in the middle of the last century. Well, the Suzerain was looking for new markets for all the cocaine it was producing, and it settled on Safre. By introducing cocaine into Safre under exclusive contract, the Suzerain created an extremely valuable captive market for an extremely addictive product. If you could somehow get the lieutenant's workers addicted to your cocaine, you could not only make them less productive, you would also force the lieutenant to pay you for your cocaine tokens each turn. Yes, you can. It's right there in the rules. You've reached a critical strategic juncture. How do you respond to the lieutenant's aggression? With each passing turn, you slowly bleed the lieutenant of coins as his own workers become less productive and more dependent on your magenta cocaine tokens. As a matter of historical fact, this is almost exactly what happened in Safre. To this day, fully half of the former Safre Empire remains dependent on international aid in exchange for a steady supply of cheap produce.
More or less.
Realizing victory is slipping away, the lieutenant launches a desperate gambit: protectionism. By erecting tariffs on your cocaine, he hopes to starve you out of the market at the risk of incurring the Suzerain's disfavor. The end game is upon you. Do you escalate the trade war with the lieutenant in hopes of crushing him with your economic might? Or do you ignore his aggression and focus on building the mighty victory column structure in Revachol herself? Alternatively, you could throw the whole game away by trying to build a public education system for the children of your workers. The choice is yours. There's a reason very few players ever attempt to build a public education system for their worker tokens. It's extremely expensive and never pays off by design. Your boondoggle nearly bankrupts the Suzerain's treasury, and you suffer a significant penalty to your final score.
Ouch.
The lieutenant opens his mouth, as if to issue a blistering retort, then hesitates.
You know, detective, there's something admirable about that, in its own way. Now, let's tally up the scores, shall we?
Computing the final scores is almost a game unto itself. You each spend an inordinate amount of time making stacks of coins, consulting. After double, then triple checking your maths, you have your final score. -5 victory points. You'll be lucky if the Suzerain doesn't have your whole family executed for such a pitiful performance.
I've got 20 points. Well, there's always next time. Figuratively, I mean. There's no way we have time to play this game again. Now, let's clean up and get back to work.
You hold the open game box before you.